Sometimes I think it all started with Claire's Instagram. Every time I scrolled through my feed, her posts would leap out at me like a burst of color in an otherwise gray day. Sipping cocktails on a tropical beach, posing in front of Parisian landmarks, laughing with new friends at rooftop parties. She always looked so free, so vibrant, like someone who had cracked the secret to life. Meanwhile, I'd sit at our kitchen table, scrolling absent-mindedly while Mark read the news on his tablet across from me. The hum of the dishwasher and the faint sound of the TV in the next room were the only background to our evenings. "Anything interesting today?" Mark asked one night, glancing up at me. "Just Claire being Claire," I said, showing him a picture of her at a vineyard in Italy. Mark chuckled, his focus already drifting back to his tablet. "She does love her adventures." His indifference stung in a way I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he didn't seem to want more. Mark was content with our life, the steady jobs, the mortgage, the occasional date night at our favorite Italian restaurant. And for a long time, I'd been content too. But lately, it felt like that contentment had curdled into something else. Restlessness, maybe even resentment. When I mentioned it to Claire during one of our coffee catch-ups, she didn't hold back. "Emma, you're in your prime," she said, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Why are you wasting it stuck in suburbia? You could be out there living your best life, traveling, meeting new people, experiencing new things." I laughed nervously. "It's not that simple. I mean, I'm married. We have responsibilities." She waved her hand dismissively. "Marriage isn't a life sentence. If you're unhappy, you owe it to yourself to figure out why. Maybe it's time to shake things up." Her words stayed with me, lingering like an itch I couldn't scratch. I started noticing every small thing about my life that felt dull. The predictable conversations with Mark, the routine weekends, the way we always ordered the same pizza on Friday nights. I didn't hate my life, far from it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing out on something bigger, something brighter. That night, as I lay in bed beside Mark, staring at the ceiling, I found myself wondering, was this it? Was this all there was? In the weeks after my conversation with Claire, the restlessness grew into something I couldn't ignore. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of the life I could be living, the glossy travel brochures at the coffee shop, the vibrant outfits in boutique windows, the carefree laughter of people sitting at outdoor cafes while I rushed home to make dinner. Mark, of course, noticed the change in me. "You've been distracted lately," he said one evening as we sat on the couch, half watching a movie. "Distracted?" I echoed, pretending not to know what he meant. "Yeah," he said, turning to face me. "You're here, but it's like your mind is somewhere else. Is something bothering you?" I hesitated, torn between the urge to be honest and the fear of starting a conversation I wasn't ready to have. "I'm fine," I said finally, forcing a smile. "Just a lot on my mind with work." He nodded, accepting my answer, but his concern lingered. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, in the small, tentative gestures he started making, bringing home flowers, suggesting we try a new restaurant, planning a weekend getaway to the mountains. At first, I appreciated his efforts, but instead of easing my dissatisfaction, they only highlighted the gap between us. Mark was trying, but it wasn't enough. He couldn't see that the problem wasn't just our routine. It was me. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through Instagram, another one of Claire's posts appeared on my feed. She was at a music festival, her face glowing with excitement, a group of equally vibrant friends surrounding her. The caption read, "Life is too short to live on autopilot. Take risks. Make memories. Find your joy." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. Was I living on autopilot? Was my life really just a series of predictable days strung together, with nothing to show for it but a comfortable home and a steady marriage? I found myself texting Claire, "Do you really think I'm wasting my life?" Her reply came almost instantly, "Yes." But it's not too late to change that. The next time we met for coffee, she didn't hold back. "Emma, you're miserable," she said bluntly, stirring her latte. "You're in a marriage that's holding you back. Mark's a nice guy, but he's not the guy who's going to give you the life you want." "How do you know what I want?" I asked, defensive but intrigued. Because you've been telling me without realizing it, she said. You want freedom, adventure, passion. You're not going to find that by sitting at home watching Netflix every night. Her words hit harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to argue, to defend my life, but another part of me, the part that had been growing louder with every passing day, wanted to believe her. Over the next few weeks, I started pulling away from Mark. I stayed out later with Claire, joined her for yoga classes and happy hours, and spent less time at home. Mark noticed, of course. "Are we okay?" he asked one night as I came home late from a dinner with Claire. "Of course," I said, brushing past him. "I've just been busy." "You're always busy lately," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. I shrugged, pretending not to hear the hurt in his tone. "I'm just trying to find a balance. That's all." But it wasn't balance I was looking for. It was escape. One night, after another evening out with Claire, I came home to find Mark waiting for me in the living room. His face was serious, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "We need to talk," he said. "Okay," I said cautiously, sitting down across from him. "I feel like I'm losing you, Emma," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what's going on, but it's like you're not here anymore, and I don't know how to fix it." I looked at him, the weight of his words pressing down on me. For a moment, I considered telling him everything, my doubts, my dreams, my growing dissatisfaction. But instead, I said, "I just need some space, Mark, that's all." His face fell, but he nodded. "Okay, if that's what you need." I went to bed that night feeling hollow, the distance between us wider than ever. Claire's words echoed in my mind. "It's not too late to change your life." But as I stared at the empty space beside me in bed, I couldn't help but wonder what that change would cost. The turning point came one evening when Mark and I were supposed to have dinner together. It had been his idea, a quiet night in, just the two of us, to reconnect. He'd texted earlier in the day, telling me he'd picked up steaks and a bottle of my favorite wine. But by the time I walked through the door, the warm smell of dinner wafting from the kitchen, I was already exhausted from a day spent with Claire. We'd gone to a new yoga class and followed it up with cocktails at a trendy bar downtown. It was fun, but something about Claire's relentless energy was starting to wear on me. "You're late," Mark said from the kitchen as I walked in, glancing at the clock. It was nearly 9 p.m. "Sorry," I said, dropping my bag by the door. "Things ran over." His face tightened as he set 2 plates on the table. "I was hoping we could have dinner together. You didn't answer my texts." I pulled out a chair, trying to sound casual. "Claire and I were busy. I didn't see them." Mark sat down across from me, his expression hard to read. "Emma, what's going on? You've been so distant lately. I feel like I don't even know you anymore." I sighed, pushing my food around my plate. "I'm just trying to figure things out." "Figure what out?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "We're supposed to be a team, Emma. If something's wrong, you can talk to me." I met his gaze, the weight of his concern pressing down on me. "Mark, I just feel like I've lost myself. Our life, this routine, it's not enough for me anymore." His face fell and he leaned back in his chair. "Not enough?" he repeated, his voice quiet. "I don't mean it like that," I said quickly. "It's just, I want more. More excitement, more freedom. I feel like I've been stuck in the same place for years." Mark's jaw tightened, and he looked away for a moment as if trying to collect himself. "So, what are you saying?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I need some space. Time to figure out who I am outside of this marriage." He stared at me, his eyes filled with hurt and disbelief. "Space?" he said flatly. "You think space is going to fix this?" "I don't know," I said again, my voice cracking. "But I feel like I can't breathe, Mark. I need to do something before it's too late." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Too late for what, Emma? You're acting like this life we've built together is a prison. But it's not. It's just life. Real, messy, imperfect life. And if that's not enough for you, then I don't know what is." His words stung, but I refused to let them sway me. It's not about you, Mark. It's about me. I need to figure out what makes me happy. And that doesn't include me? He asked, his voice breaking. I couldn't answer. The silence between us stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Mark stood, his chair scraping against the floor. If that's what you want, Emma, I won't stop you, but don't expect me to wait around while you figure it out. I watched him walk out of the kitchen, his shoulders slumped, and for a brief moment I felt a pang of regret. But Claire's words echoed in my mind. You deserve to be happy. Don't let anyone hold you back. Over the next few days, Mark and I barely spoke. I stayed out later, avoiding the tension at home, while he threw himself into work. The distance between us grew until it felt like we were living completely separate lives. One evening, he came home from work and sat me down in the living room. I've been thinking, he said, his voice steady but cold. If you want out, just say it. I can't keep living like this, wondering if today's the day you decide to leave. The finality in his tone caught me off guard. Mark, I just need time. No, Emma, he interrupted. You've had time. You've been pulling away for months. I deserve someone who actually wants to be here. If that's not you, then say it. Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him. For all my dissatisfaction, I had never stopped loving him. But was love enough? I think we should separate, I whispered. Mark nodded slowly, his face expressionless. Okay, he said, standing up. I'll stay with my brother until we figure things out. As he walked out the door, the enormity of what I'd done hit me. I had wanted freedom, but as I sat alone in the silent house, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd just given up the one thing that truly mattered. After Mark walked out that night, the silence in the house was overwhelming. At first, I told myself this was what I wanted: space to breathe, freedom to rediscover myself. But as the days turned into weeks, the reality of my choices began to sink in. The first few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I spent hours on the phone with Claire, who was quick to reassure me that I'd made the right decision. This is your time, Emma, she said confidently. You can finally live the life you've always dreamed of. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for a while I let myself believe it. I started saying yes to everything: nights out at trendy bars, weekend trips, spontaneous shopping sprees. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living. But beneath the surface, there was an ache I couldn't ignore. Every time I came home to an empty house, every time I reached for my phone to text Mark before remembering I couldn't, the weight of my decisions pressed down on me. One Saturday afternoon, as I was scrolling through photos from a recent trip with Claire, I noticed something unsettling. In every picture, I was smiling, laughing, posing, but the joy felt forced, hollow. The carefree life I'd been chasing didn't look or feel the way I thought it would. Meanwhile, Mark was moving on. Mutual friends told me he was staying with his brother and had started going to the gym again. He seems different, one friend said hesitantly. Happier, maybe. The thought of him being happier without me was harder to bear than I'd expected. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I decided to reach out to him. I sent a simple text. Hi, just wanted to check in. Hope you're doing okay. His response came hours later. I'm fine. Thanks for asking. The coldness of his reply stung, but I couldn't blame him. I had been the one to pull away, the one to ask for space, and now I was reaping what I'd sown. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself deeper into my new lifestyle, desperate to prove to myself that I'd made the right choice. But no matter how many nights I spent surrounded by people, I couldn't shake the loneliness that followed me home. One night, after another party that left me feeling empty, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me didn't look free or happy. She looked lost. Claire's words echoed in my mind. You deserve to be happy. But was this happiness? Or had I traded a steady, fulfilling life for a fleeting illusion of excitement? The final blow came when I ran into Mark at the grocery store. He looked good, healthier, more confident, almost like the weight of our relationship had lifted off his shoulders. Hi, I said awkwardly, forcing a smile. Hi, Emma, he replied, his tone polite but distant. We exchanged pleasantries, but it was clear that the warmth between us was gone. As he walked away, I felt a pang of regret so sharp it took my breath away. I had wanted freedom, but at what cost? That night, as I sat alone in the house we'd once shared, I finally allowed myself to confront the truth. I had given up something real and meaningful for a dream that didn't exist. And now, I wasn't sure if I could ever get it back. The realization that I'd lost Mark hit me harder than I expected. For all my talk about freedom and rediscovery, I'd thought deep down that he'd always be there, waiting for me to figure things out. But seeing him at the grocery store, so composed and distant, made it painfully clear I had let him go, and he wasn't coming back. The house felt emptier than ever that night. I sat on the couch, scrolling through old photos on my phone, vacations we'd taken, birthdays we'd celebrated, quiet moments captured at home. Each image was a reminder of the life we'd built together, a life I'd dismissed as dull and predictable but now realized was filled with love and stability. I tried to convince myself that I could move forward, that this was just a bump in the road. Claire called me that evening, bubbling with excitement about a trip she was planning to Mexico. "You should come with me," she said. "It's exactly what you need, a fresh start." But the thought of another trip, another attempt to fill the void, felt exhausting. "I don't think so," I said quietly. Claire hesitated. "Emma, don't start second-guessing yourself now. You made the right decision. Mark wasn't giving you the life you deserved." Her words, once so persuasive, now felt hollow. I mumbled something about needing time and ended the call, feeling more alone than ever. The next morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in months. I needed closure, not just with Mark, but with myself. I decided to write him a letter. In the letter, I apologized. I told him how much I regretted the way I'd handled things, how I'd let my dissatisfaction and selfishness blind me to the good we had. I admitted that I'd let others influence me, that I'd been chasing an idea of happiness that turned out to be nothing more than an illusion. I didn't ask for him to come back. I knew it was too late for that. I simply wanted him to know that I saw him now, really saw him, and that I was grateful for the years we'd shared. I mailed the letter the next day, unsure if he'd even respond. A week later, his reply came in the form of a short, handwritten note. "Thank you for your honesty, Emma. I hope you find the happiness you're looking for. Take care." His words were kind, but they were also final. He had moved on, and I needed to do the same. As I folded his note and placed it in a drawer, I felt a bittersweet sense of acceptance. I couldn't undo the choices I'd made, but I could learn from them. The life I'd had with Mark was gone, but it had taught me a lesson I wouldn't forget. Happiness isn't something you chase. It's something you build, piece by piece, with the people who matter most. And next time, I wouldn't let it slip away.